What is going on, everyone? It is your boy Knight, and today we're going to be taking a look at stance characters. Stance characters tend to be a little bit more complicated than your regular Shoto or all-rounders, and there's kind of a couple different types of stance characters that we'll need to go over so you get a better understanding of what is classified as a stance character and what they're really trying to do in the game as a whole. So if you're a newer player listening to this trying to learn about stance characters, I'm going to need you to lock in for a sec, because this one might get a little complicated, but I'll do my best to go through each and kind of explain what I mean. Technically, there is no subclass of stance character, but throughout my years of playing fighting games, there is kind of 3 different types of stance characters, but they're not really named. So let me explain. Now, this is just what I'm going to call them to make it easier to understand, but these aren't really things that people call them. I've heard it a couple times throughout the years, so that's kind of where I'm getting this from. But for the most part, we have stance changers, stance swappers, and stance. My entire kit is tied to one button or special movers. This one doesn't really have a good name. But basically, there's 3 different types of stance characters, even though they're not normally classified as such, and normally all just called stance characters. The first group are characters like Kagura from BlazBlue, where their quote-unquote stance is really just one button or special move that gives them access to a bunch of other moves. It's very, very central to their game plan, but they're not actively changing move sets a bunch. They just have an ability that gives them access to a lot of versatility, and it's kind of just called a stance. But it's they're still a stance character, but it's very different from the 2 other types. Then we have characters like Narmaya in Granblue and Mr. Hat in Shovel Knight Showdown. Bet you didn't see that one coming, I'm not gonna lie. But these are characters that their different stance is literally just an entire different moveset they can change at will. Funnily enough, characters like Pyra and Mithra in Smash Bros, and I guess by extension even Sheik and Zelda in Smash Bros, fall under this archetype, but it is kind of really weird, because if you look at someone like Narmaya, it's like, oh yeah, that's a stance character, but then all of a sudden, if Zelda changes into Sheik, even though it's kind of the same idea, they're not ever really, no one's calling Zelda a stance character, you know what I mean? So this one is a little weird, and I feel like kind of double standard, because if it's like a different character, even though it's just visual, people don't call it a stance character, but you get the point. These are the characters that swap out their entire moveset in the middle of the battle. And finally, we have the one that I feel like most people's brain, at least mine does, instantly goes to when you say stance character, and these are the characters like Xiaoyu and Hwoarang from Tekken, where they actively switch in and out of their stances in the middle of battle. So these characters, pretty much, they have a bunch of stances that each give them a certain set of options, and they can flow in and out of them naturally through combat. Some of their combos will take them into their stance, and some of their combos will take them out. So now that you know the basics, I'll go a bit more in depth on all of these 3 types so you can kind of see what I mean. But all of these, again, are considered stance characters. It just, some of them are a little iffy depending on who you ask. But let's start off with the first one I mentioned and take a look at Kagura in BlazBlue. Kagura as a character is classified as a stance character, but as I said, he's kind of a one-button demon. Hitting Kagura's trait button in this game, or whatever it's called, D or something, I forgot, whatever the special button is, hitting this button will take you into one of 3 stances. If you hit it in neutral, it'll take you into his neutral stance. If you hit it while holding down, it will take you into his down stance. And if you hit it while holding forward, it will take you into his forward stance. These 3 stances each have one of 3 different special moves you can throw out, depending on which one of the other 3 buttons you hit. Following me so far? So for example, neutral stance here has this option, and this option, all depending on which other button you press. And of course, this also applies to his other 2 stances, his down stance, 1, 2, and 3 different special moves, and his forward stance as well, 1, 2, and 3 different special moves. So his stance is really just 9 special moves packed into one button. So while it is of course integral to his game plan, he's not really switching stances. He just pops into one for half a second to pick one of 9 special moves, and that's it. So while he's like a stance character, it's very, very different from the ones that we're kind of used to. He's really just using it as like a versatility move, and it is a little weird. Funnily enough, I can give you a weird example. Take a look here at Aki in Street Fighter 6. Aki is not a stance character by any means. She's like an entirely poke and pressure character, but funnily enough, take a look at this move. This is her, we'll just call it slither stance, and from this, depending on if you press punch, kick, or input the grab command, Aki will either shoot forward with the punch button, do a little combo extender double kick with the kick button, and make me wish I was Ken when you input the grab input. And if you were paying attention in the previous section, this is very similar to how Kagura works. It's a stance, quote unquote, that you can pick different options from. The difference, of course, here is that this is just one of Aki's tools that she can use, and she's primarily doing other things. Well, Kagura has 9 moves packed into one button, and his entire character kind of revolves around that, so he's a stance character and Aki isn't. But you see what I mean, where it's a very similar style and kind of skirting the line for Kagura being a stance character, because he's never really in the stance for more than 0.5 seconds. With that being said, let's take a look at the guys that are in stances for a bit longer of a period of time. For this example, we're going to take a look at Narmaya here, and ready? Watch this. See that right there is Narmaya switching to an entirely different moveset, normals, and everything. It's kind of insane, no? Narmaya is technically in a quote-unquote stance for the entire game. She can just switch between 2 different movesets, which is a little weird. She's always in a stance, and just switching between them kind of gives her a different game plan. One of them is more for combos, and one of them is more for footsies. In her case, she can switch between them whenever she wants, and it gives her different normals and special moves. This is very different from Kagura. Kagura just has a bunch of special moves in a button. She pretty much just has 2 entire kits she has to work with, and this is very, very different from how Kagura interacts with his stance, as you could imagine. Although, as I kind of alluded to before, here, watch this as we take a look at Super Smash Bros. Melee. That was technically Zelda switching to an entirely different moveset, just like Narmaya did, but no one calls Zelda a stance character. This one is kind of weird, because like, for example, in Melee, Zelda's down special transforms her into Sheik, and again, it is entirely 2 different movesets that do 2 different functions, just like Narmaya. Sheik is a highly aggressive rushdown demon, and Zelda is a playable character in the game, but you know, we don't really talk about that one. And to be fair, if you ask people that play Melee, Zelda's not even a character because they're never switching, but you get the point. It's the exact same thing as Narmaya, but one is considered a stance character and one normally isn't. Same kind of deal with Pyra and Mithra in Ultimate. But the thing is, like, if the quote-unquote stance swap happens to be like 2 different people don't really see it as a stance swap. Like, the difference is literally just that it's a different person. Like, if I go, yo guys, what is happening right here? And you know, well, Mr. Knight, that doesn't seem like that's just still Narmaya. That's not Sheik right now. Like that just seems like she raised her hands in the air. So like this one is super weird, and you know, like it's kind of funky that some of them are considered stance characters and some aren't, just based off like one of them switching like people or entities, and the other just like actually like doing a different stance. But yeah, I mean, like technically Zelda's a stance character, not really what people want to hear, but it is just a certain oddity with quote-unquote stance characters that you kind of got to get used to. And the last type is the free flow stance characters that you're probably more familiar with. These are the ones like Hwoarang and Xiaoyu in Tekken. So Hwoarang will be my example for this one, and here Hwoarang has 4 stances. I'll probably just put it up on screen. He has right foot forward, right flamingo, and left flamingo, and his game plan flows from one to the other seamlessly. He'll enter one, do a couple moves, enter the other, do another one, enter the other, keep going, and it's like a loop. And these are what most people think of when they think of stance characters. They can go into a mode that has a couple options, they do the option a couple times, and then it flows into another stance. These are characters like Xiaoyu that do this perfectly, and I think Xiaoyu is pretty much the embodiment of a stance character. She has a lot of options, but she's not in them permanently like Narmaya from Granblue or Gen from Street Fighter 4. She's only in them for a small limited amount amount of time, but it's still more than Kagura just giving him special moves for half a second, if that makes sense. So as you can see, they're all kind of similar-ish, and they're all stance characters, but they are different enough that the classification can seem kind of funky at times. So whether you're like Kagura, Narmaya, or Hwoarang, you're all stance characters, but you know, even if you're someone like Sheik, you know, you're still a stance character, but they do seem kind of different on the surface, so I see why new players get confused all the time. But there is a lot of people, I mean, if they have a different stance or a different mode, you can technically just call them a stance character, like Kagura or someone like that. But you know, some do it for some special moves, some do it for entirely new movesets, and some go in and out of their stance to get cooler combos and flashy setups. So obviously I can't really tell you the game plan or how to play as the stance character, because I mean, it entirely depends on the character. Someone like Hwoarang, his stances are all geared towards aggressive offense, where someone like Narmaya, as I kind of said, will go between footsies and aggression. So I can't really give you a one-for-all game plan, because it's gonna have to depend on whatever character you're playing. But if you want to pick up stance characters, there is right and wrong places to start. Like puppet characters that we talked about before, stance characters are typically harder to play, because sometimes you have to learn how to go between a bunch of stances and incorporate it into your game plan. And as we said with Narmaya, sometimes you just have to learn entirely different movesets. So where do you start with these type of characters? Well, first up, learning something like Kagura will take a lot of time, but it isn't a bad idea to start, because Kagura's entire thing is his, again, 9 special moves packed into one button. But once you know the moves and you remember which one's which, then it's not that hard to start working it into your game plan, and your brain will start picking the right option the more and more you play it. For sure, it will still take time, and it's not easy, but it is one way to go about picking them up. The other way would be one-tricking a character like Narmaya. These characters are typically very hard to play, especially for beginners, but if you're one-tricking it and you just kind of learn them at the same time and you learn the combos, you'll eventually get used to the normals of each stance. But these ones I really don't recommend starting with. Like, could you imagine if you threw a new player on Gen in Street Fighter 4? It just kind of wouldn't end well. So I'd recommend staying away from characters with dual movesets if you have the choice. Even something like Sheik and Zelda, funnily enough, is a little too much for new players. 100% maybe relax on that one. Characters like Hwoarang and Xiaoyu, that one kind of depends, because well, Xiaoyu I'd tell new players to run away very fast. Characters like Hwoarang or even something like Zafina, they have a lot of options, but like Kagura, once you know the options and you can start picking the right ones, it's not too bad. Hwoarang is a very button mash friendly character, so if you wanted to start with something like him, it'd be fine, but you also wouldn't really be understanding the flow between stances, so it's kind of a cheat code and depends how you want to learn. Whereas something like Zafina in Tekken 8 or Tekken 7, she has a bunch of options, and it's really scary to see that big move list. But if you're one-tricking Zafina, you can kind of just learn her combos, and what button does what will kind of come with time. So if you were gonna learn a stance character, it'd probably be something like Kagura, where it's just special moves, or something like Zafina, where you can just one-trick it and Google combo videos, and eventually you'll kind of understand what goes into what. But again, do be warned, these characters are a lot harder than most other characters. Now, to tell you about some main stance characters in a bunch of different games as I normally do, again, this one's gonna be a bit harder because some of them are a little tricky. Like something like Street Fighter 6 nowadays, I wouldn't say Street Fighter 6, at least currently at the time of this recording, has any true stance character. Sure, Marissa kind of has a parry stance, and I mean Chun-Li kind of has her shit going on, but those aren't stance characters, right? Something like BlazBlue, of course, as we said, has Kagura, MK1 has Shang Tsung, and to even some extent Ghostface and Ashura. Strive, of course, has Abba. Under Night has Yuzu. Of course, Granblue has Narmaya. Tekken has the whole fucking roster. Literally, just take your pick. If you like stance characters, oh boy, do I have a game for you. And I mean, as we've discussed, the Smash Brothers series has Zelda, Hilda, Sheik, Pyra, and Mithra as their stapled stance characters. There are maybe some popular ones I missed, but stance characters are something that you'll find, and then you'll either be like, this is sick, or you won't pick them. So look around, have fun. There are plenty of stance characters to go around in fighting games, and I hope you learned something about them in this video. That should be it for me today. This one was a bit longer than normal, but if you have any other archetypes you'd like me to take a look at, please let me know in the comments below. I might even do a little poll on the channel for upcoming videos, but I mean, yeah, stance swap that subscribe button, give your boy a like for the algorithm, and that's about it for me. I will see you all later. Have a good night.